Okay, we can't get the live stream on. Oh, has it started?
Okay, well, welcome colleagues to this meeting of Lighting and Public Protection Committee, and nice to be back in the Council House in refurbished circumstances. What I'd like to do is new committee, just go round people just to say their names and their ward in respect of councillors as the new committee, and the officers will say their name and title. So, Sybil, would you like to start?
Sorry, Chair, I wasn't paying attention to what you were saying.
I'm just saying, if colleagues could say their name and ward, just so we can introduce ourselves.
My name is Sybil Spence. So, James Ward.
Okay.
Is my award.
Thank you.
Sam Forsyth, Quinton.
Councillor Barbara Dring from Osgood.
Councillor Diane Donaldson, Bromford and Hodge Hill.
Councillor Mary Locke from Sturchley.
And at the moment, I'm the licensing manager.
I'm David James, I'm the finance manager for regulatory services.
Regulatory service for data standards, illegal activity and regional investigations.
Good morning, I'm Mark Croxford. I'm the head of environmental health and risk control for the Nuisance.
I'm the community manager. That's for Davis Building Board.
I see a head of licensing markets, registration services and environmental sector.
Good morning, Lisa Morgan, Legal Services.
Hi, I'm Izzy Knowles, Councillor for Moseley.
Anyway, Councillor Gray, Fox Green.
Councillor Simon Morrell, Councillor for Franklin Great Park Ward.
Councillor Adam Hicks, Highton Heath Ward.
Councillor Douglas, Stockport, Newton Ward.
Councillor Zabek, Parsley and Hazel.
Councillor Beck, Councillor.
Okay, colleagues, thank you for those introductions. So first
item, notice of recording webcast. I advise the meeting to note that this meeting will be webcast live or subsequent broadcast by the Council's meeting YouTube site, and that members of the press and public may record and take photographs except whether they're confidential or exempt.
Item 2, declarations of interest. Member reminder declare all relevant and non-including interest. Are there any interests to declare? I'll take that. No, thank you very much for that.
Apologies, I think we've had apologies from Councillor Pritchard. Thank you for that. Okay, number of information items. Next, the item 4 is to note the appointment of the Licensing and Public Protection Committee, which I think speaks for itself. And then election of deputy chair. Regulatory committees are allowed to appoint deputy chairs. And I'd like to move Councillor Diane Donaldson for that position.
I'll second.
Okay. Is that agreed? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that. Okay,
so we're on to functions and powers and duties, and this is an opportunity for
the officers to introduce their roles. I thought it'd be useful for the new committee just to hear from senior officers concerning the roles they perform, and obviously you'll hear from other officers in the process of the committee agenda. And what I should say here is that we're having a changing of the guard. Colleagues from the old committee will know that Paul Lancaster has been our interim, I remember the title, Assistant Director for Regulation Enforcement for 2.5 years. Paul's not here today, by the way, because of Commonwealth Games business, and Sajila Nasir is standing in for him. But there has been an appointments process for the appointment of a permanent director, and I'm very pleased to say that Sajila is in fact our director designate, and will be taking over in September, I think. Yeah, when Paul leaves. And obviously there'll be an opportunity for us to thank Paul for his work at the appropriate time. But I'm very pleased that Sajid is going to be taking it.
Congratulations.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so what I'd like to do then is we're going to have a number of presentations around the functions of the
powers and duties and the particular functions of the lead officers. So, Sabina, do you want?
Yeah. So, hello, I'm going to kick off with the register office, which is one of the services that falls into my current portfolio. As you will, I'm sure, be aware, the register office covers first step marriages, the preliminaries to those marriages or civil partnership, and ceremonies for citizenship and other purposes. So, obviously, you can see a list up there of the work that we do. I'm not sure if you are aware, but the service is actually governed and directed by the Director General, who's General Registrar as part of HMO Passport Office, and is administered locally by Birmingham City Council, and the proper officer for registration matters, which at this moment in time is Paul. So the Registrar has two governing bodies, if you like, both the City Council and the General Register Office. And this is just a very, very brief outline of the sorts of numbers that we dealt with last year. We are the largest register office in the UK, and we dealt with about 20,000 birth registrations, about 11,000 death registrations, almost 2,000 marriages and ceremonies, and with 5,000 adults becoming new citizenships. You can see the quantity of that, as well as 82,000 certificates that were issued. Moving on to our licensing function, you will be aware that the licensing service is responsible for a very broad range of licensing and registration matters, alcohol and premises licensing, sex establishment, and of course, hacking, carriage and private hire, you'll be very familiar with. We also do skin piercings, charity collections, and practical dealers. And we divided into three specific teams. One of those is the General Licensing Team, which administers licensing for the Licensing Act 2002, Gambling Act, and other acts that fall within its provision. And that team will deal with all hearings and appeals to work in that particular area or function. We then have the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire team, and they deal with vehicle driver licences and operator licences, and again they will deal with hearings and appeals in those functions. And then finally we have the enforcement team, and they deal with matters of compliance and enforcement for all of the licence types and carry out both proactive and reactive work to check that compliance, and obviously we'll take enforcement action in line with our enforcement policy where appropriate. Additionally, they work with street trading, so street trading falls within the portfolio, and considering street trading consent and enforcement of illegal street traders. You're very familiar with the Licensing Act 2003 and the four licensing objectives that we have to ensure that all licenses are granted under order, public safety, protection, prevention, advertising, and protection children. There is an assumption to grant a licence unless there's relevant objection relating to one of the four principles, and licence applications are for 28 days. If there isn't an objection to a licence, it will be granted.
We'll get these slides to people.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, so you'll get those.
They're not in the,
No, they're not.
ah, okay.
Standard licences here, licence hearings is banned probabilities, therefore hearsay is allowable, and I think that's key because most of the things that we deal with in regulation enforcement is criminal legislation, which is beyond reasonable doubt. And here we're just saying where the best evidence will come from in terms of, making an objection to support that objection. And we go on to licensing subcommittees which meet regularly and frequently with the matters of concern, and obviously licensing and public protection committee meets every other month looking at the work and services and to adjudicate on matters which can't be resolved with subcommittee. And then then finally, in terms of what I will be presenting, we look at private rented sector. So this is a team that only came to us last September, so relatively new, but historically have been within regulation enforcement many decades ago. Unfortunately, I also remember those many decades ago. So with the private rented sector, we have a private rented strategy. It's the purpose of that is to ensure the safety and welfare of people living within the private rented sector properties. Our 7 strategy priorities are bringing empty homes back into use, mandatory HMO licensing, local initiatives for local issues, preventing illegal evictions and harassment, tackling criminality, energy efficiency, and influencing the government in terms of ensuring that legislation is appropriate for the purposes which we hope to utilise it for. And when I spoke about local initiatives, really this covers the future proposed licensing schemes that we're pursuing at the moment within Birmingham City Council area. I'm sure you're very familiar with those schemes, one being the selective licensing scheme for all private rented sector properties within 25 wards of the city, covering about 50,000 premises, and with a projected staff of about 130. And yesterday at Cabinet, we were given approval to start a consultation on additional licensing. The proposal is for a citywide scheme that will cover smaller HMOs that have 3 to 4 occupants. HMOs with 5 or more occupants are already covered by the mandatory scheme. And then finally, the members' priority from 22-23 is supporting action against unlicensed HMOs working with the police to discover instances of category 1 hazard, and also including landlord knowledge through training packages and to introduce a mandatory HMO rating scheme. So this is specific work just for 22-23. So, thanks for that.
Okay. Any questions? We'll send this information to you, and again, if you want to follow up in detail, you've got that the officer's directory, but if you've got any questions immediately on any of those areas. If not, we'll move to Mark Croxton next on environmental health. Mark?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just try and share my screen. See, I'm already struggling with technology more than the others on my phone. My name is Mark Croxton. I'm the head of environmental health and pest control for the City Council. The work with environmental health is very, very broad. So I'm just going to dance through a number of slides. There's 20 odd slides in the pack, just to give you an idea of the sort of work that we cover. But I'm not going to go into any detail and questions. So we usually call public health inspectors. So a lot of the work that we do deal with is anything that's to do with situations that affect the health of the public. And in this one, this is an overflowing drain that's filled the side yard. And we would serve notices on the owner or the occupiers to clear their yard. If it's owned by Severn Trent, then Severn Trent would do that work on our behalf. We're also heavily involved in, my screen's changing quickly now. We're also heavily involved in nuisances, and the most common nuisance that you'll be aware of is noise nuisance. In this one, we've gone through the points of speaking with the owners, asking them to turn the music down, serving notice upon them, and then it's a breach of the notice that then becomes an offence. What we do if they break breach of notice, we'll roll take the seizure on the left, that's the officers and the locksmith just getting ready to enter the premises, person there, breach of the police, and on the right is the equipment that may be removed and retained. If it's claimed, we will be told it for 3 months, and then they pay for the cost of the seizure and we return it. If they buy new and they start the nuisance up again, we'd re-enter the premises and remove it. At that point, we'd start prosecution proceedings as well. Another aspect of the team is we work on clean air, and this is an example of a clean station that's used to monitor clean air. It samples all of the pollutants. It's an automatic station. It's just an example of how a station would be laid out.
And we're also doing some monitoring around the CAS to make sure that the air zone is actually having an effect on monitoring the air quality around the city. We have emerging trends that are coming about. This relates to the public health side and transmission of diseases, bloodborne diseases in this case. There's emerging treatments such as microblading that's occurring at the moment. Tattooing's been well known for many centuries, but that's still ongoing. And interesting, when we got involved with the tattoo trade, they were really keen to see scoring on the doors like we have for food inspections, because they like to be represented and seem to be of a high quality. And that's an interesting aspect that maybe we can get back to after COVID. On the right is piercing, and there's a lot of piercing that goes on lawfully and possibly unlawfully or uncontrolled. This is sort of an amazing thing for itself. This is called wet cupping, where they create a vacuum and heat inside these cups. And then what happens, they put a small cut onto the skin, and then as they cool, there's a vacuum and it sucks blood into there. Obviously, we can send out bloodborne diseases. We've had a few of these in the last 2 years. This is a thing called pica. You've probably heard about young children eating soil in the garden. Pica is about eating that type of thing. We're actually getting a number of people with lead poisoning. So there's youngsters and people with disabilities who've got lead poisoning. And we're doing investigations both at school and at home to try and determine where it's coming from and making sure that there's nothing untoward. And we're working with the UK HSA on those. But we have the powers to enter premises because it would be prejudicial to health. And we would ensure that those people don't have access to whatever it was that was causing it, or if it was unknown, identifying it and then it can be removed. Occasionally there's a requirement for exhumations. It happens more often. My screen's changed with yours, hasn't it? There's a requirement for exhumations. Sometimes people have been buried and they wish, the family wish to move them to the grave. Sometimes they want to remove them to another country, and there's a requirement in law that an environmental health officer is present during an exhumation. And obviously we work with them to take this and the cemetery, etc., to make sure it's safe and there's no transmission of disease through that process. And we're also responsible for investigations into infectious diseases, and usually it's salmonella and other foodborne illnesses, like parasite or campylobacter. This doesn't represent COVID, because I think 90% of the staff have been doing COVID for the last 2 years, and everything else has been just liver. But we were also heavily involved in making sure premises were trading and compliance with the legislation was undertaken during the COVID period. And the next screen is falling. There's obviously, US councillors will be aware of this, that there's a number of people on board. There's an issue around support around mental health. When it's so that the deemed to be filthy and or vermin, then the local authority has the powers, or the environmental health officers have the powers to go in and to remove that waste. If it was inert matter, can I just finish the presentation? Sorry. I get what you do. Sorry, it's my fault because the lights have gone, so sorry. So the environmental health officers don't have the ability to go in. If it's inert matter, we wouldn't enter the premises, but if it's waste, animal waste, that sort of thing, then we would. And obviously, if it's full of vermin. This is another similar one where there was problems with hoarding, and you can see lots of wine bottles up the stairs, etc. In this instance, the gentleman had died. And they couldn't get him out of the flat, and it took 5 officers 3 hours and 2 lorries to actually just get up the stairs and into the rooms and the body could be removed. We also deal with the consequences of bodies having not been found and needing to clean up after the body's been removed. So again, if anything like that occurs, it will come to environmental health. We're also responsible, as is the HSE, for health and safety inspections. So this isn't internal health and safety, this is external within businesses. High risk premises are done by the health and safety executive, low risk is done by the local authority. Having said that, we also undertake investigations into fatal accidents, serious accidents, and you've got everything from the top right here with a ceiling collapse down to sadly on the bottom right, a gentleman called Colin North who was killed at a racetrack that we're undertaking some enforcement action over, and that will be concluding shortly. I also have a team which is the animal welfare team. They look at the legally imported dogs, etc. The second line down says no pet passports, and I know that's caused some mirth amongst when they initially see it. But actually, what we're referring to is rabies control in there. So it's all about trying to ensure we don't have problems with diseases abroad, and that the animals themselves have vaccinations, etc. We also get involved in animal cruelty. We have powers on the RSPCA and we'll take action against people, and we've had many people banned from dealing with animals. And the more famous part that we get involved with is stray animals. So any animals that stray, we will recover and we will take back to the owners. And if they can't be claimed, we take them to the dog's home. Recently, we've been asked to look at sports ground safety certification, and we're the lead officers for the sports ground safety, which means that we get all the information from all the agencies, police, fire, etc., and building control, and we will issue the safety certificates for all of the stadiums. You're probably aware that we've got responsibility for recovery of council land from unauthorised encampments. Food, we deal with food complaints. This was a piece of wire that was recovered from a child's neck after the leaking, and it was a bit of flex from the electrical cable. Other food complaints, things like raw meat, raw chicken, that's mice that have been into a box of peppers and into most of the peppers, and that's mouldy chopping boards that are in the food business during inspection. And then that doesn't look too bad unless you leave rice at ambient temperature for many hours. It will cause food poisoning, and that's what had occurred there. Pre-cooked rice left for many hours, and potentially people who then consume that may get food poisoning. A big growth area in our work, which we haven't had much support in, is the food allergen side. So you've all heard about people eating and having an allergic reaction. Potentially that has caused a number of deaths within the country, not potentially, has caused a number of deaths. And we are now looking at making sure that allergen information is given out, both on pre-packed as well as ready to food. And then finally, we've got pest control. We're funded to undertake domestic pest, rat treatments free at the point of service. So we treat rats in domestic gardens and houses. But we also do other work that have a target of £800,000 income target. So on the left, there's an alleyway which we've been employed by Housing's Clear, and on the right is that the work has been completed. We were also employed to look after some void houses prior to demolition, which the team boarded up as well as killed all the rats and removed all the rubbish from the back. And we have quite a heavy income to do that. And that's just the work cloud. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Lot of material there, so give sort of a quick snapshot of how much is done. Mary?
I just wanted to say, maybe I'm very pedantic, but hoarding isn't always to do with mental dementia and things like that. So
Trying to engage with the services, but it's really difficult sometimes. Thank you.
Any questions? You want to ask? Okay, I'll move on to Tony quickly. Training standards. Tony.
Chair, my mark, I think, not going Well, we're looking at the problem with the Wi-Fi at the moment, so please bear with me on that.
I thought it just missed.
We'll send you obviously the presentations anyway, so you will have the detail there. Of course, anything you want to follow up on, please contact the officers directly. Is it coming through now?
Yeah, there we are. Thank you, Chair. Yes, training standards service at the moment is split between 3 services. I'll go through those. But the training standards that sits within Birmingham City Council currently has 12 officers, enforcement officers. We receive over 4,000 reactive requests for assistance a year, and we currently have 5 proactive objectives that I'll talk through. The first one, obviously, being the key one, which is the Commonwealth Games, because the trading and advertising regs, which has been introduced through the Birmingham Commonwealth Games Act, is predominantly a priority for the Trading Standards Service. It will deal with pop-up and ambush advertising. It will deal with people trying to trade on the backs of the Commonwealth Games and those that are keen to come into the city centre and try and sell shoddy goods or goods to the crowds that hopefully the Commonwealth Games will attract in the next 4 weeks. Any changes? If it changes, there we go. So one of the other of the 5 proactive objectives is protecting the vulnerable. Trading Standards deals with road traders, and we deal with people who are obviously knocking on the door, requesting that they want to fix your roof, windows, driveway, gardens, trees, and don't give a cooling off period. And we'll talk about, I think, Sajida at the next committee will talk about a road trader that we've just seen in prison for 6 years as a result of his behaviour across Birmingham. Our third priority is age-restricted sales. It's everything from cigarettes, vaping, alcohol, knives, sunbeds, fillers, cosmetic fillers, tattoos in terms of age restricting. And the team are continuing out doing proactive exercises with both Challenge 25 as well as with school children to see whether or not again road businesses are willing to sell any of these products to children across the city. Clearly, the sale of alcohol to children will not only have an impact around health, but also in respect of behaviours. So we find that there are complaints around social issues, parks, etc., when children have access to alcohol being sold to them by local premises. And we also deal with illicit products, so whether it be illicit alcohol, we've seen alcohol with high concentrations of chemicals in that would poison you rather than give people a high, as well as illicit tobacco, which is both non-duty paid as well as smuggled or counterfeit items that in essence have been pulled together from all sorts of horrible things, including sawdust and general dirt that goes into the tobacco. Street scene, we're involved in illegal advertising, so where a company places a placard on the street furniture, it's illegal, and we have issues with trying to identify who are behind the adverts, because many times the telephone number that is being advertised doesn't have or isn't registered, and therefore when there are problems following people using these services, then in essence it's very difficult for those consumers to trace the individuals. So it's an issue for us around consumer protection. And proceeds of crime. So when we're dealing with road traders, we try and take their illegal gains from them. We've got 2 accredited financial investigators within the team, which is more than most authorities, and the proceeds of crime is used to actually fund that activity. So it's the money that they get in at the moment is used to fund the ongoing activity for these 2 financial investigators, as well as looking at whether or not we can introduce further resource in that particular area. We then look at illegal money lending. The illegal money lending team, it's England-wide. It's hosted by Birmingham City Council Training Standards. It began in 2004 as a pilot project. It's been running just shy of 20 years. It's a dedicated team of specialists that are looking at and prosecute and support victims who are involved with loan sharks. Centre for Social Justice have just done a significant report on the team and the activities of the team, and they've concluded that in England alone, over 1 million people are estimated to be using loan sharks, which is a five-fold increase on the last report that was done in 2010. Some of their findings include just over a fifth of victims take over 5 years to repay the illegal lender, 7% have been repaying for over 10 years. They are extortionate rates of interest. Most times we're dealing with double bubble, which is if you have £100, you'll pay back £200, but you'll pay it back so quickly that the APRs on average are about 15,000%, but we've seen them as high as 4.5 million%. 51% have been verbally abused, threatened, or harmed by an illegal lender. Why people borrow in 2020? The majority is household bills. There are other areas, and clearly people who are struggling through the financial crisis. We're concerned that may be on the increase. And we work with central government to fund the project. It's wholly funded through a levy that's on the consumer credit industry. We look for new trends and respond accordingly. We've got a prevent process that looks at trying to educate the next generation away from using illegal lenders. We prosecute those that are involved, and we try and increase visibility and marketing to continue to run the message that loan sharks are bad. And that's just some of the things that we do around raising awareness, both in terms of the communities, banners, the hotline we run, the social media that we run, as well as using quite impactful pictures to really get the message out there. And then we've got the regional investigation team. This is a team that is again hosted by Birmingham Trading Standards. It's funded wholly by the National Trading Standards Service. It investigates, takes actions against rogue traders that operate on a regional basis. And we are also committed to dealing with a organised crime issue in respect of counterfeit items, and that's the manufacturing, importing, online as well as market sales of counterfeit goods. We've won the Anti-Counterfeiting Award 3 years running for Operation Viola, and we're tackling national and regional issues in respect of organised gangs and criminals.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you for the academic projection. I have one question. You will find it there are lots of people who speak in English, lots of about language spoken. There are some of the grocery shops. They are actually, I have personally seen people are selling out-of-date goods. So from the Public Protection Committee, I know they got some duty to do, and do they normally visit at a certain time, for example, 3 months, 6 months, some of the shops to check whether or not they are complying with the regulation?
Yeah, I mean, if we get complaints around shops that are selling illegal counterfeit goods, then we will visit them. It is one of our priorities is to try and stop counterfeit goods. Some people suggest that everybody knows that counterfeits are more important, but it doesn't have an impact. Well, actually, it does have an impact, and there's lots of studies that will tell you that people who are selling counterfeit goods actually stops investment because if legitimate business wants to come into an area to invest and start up, then if they're competing in an area where the ghost economy is not being tackled, for instance, they'll go elsewhere. So if people are concerned about counterfeit goods, then they just need to contact the team. In terms of the language issues, I think one of the difficulties that we have is getting the message out there. But ultimately, I think most people nowadays, regardless of sort of background, will know if something is too cheap, it is too cheap, so to speak. And I think, that should be alarm bells for everybody. We would hope that sort of, councillors and, other community leaders will also be able to assist and report it into the team as well. We haven't got any budget for getting the message out there into other languages at the moment, because obviously the like all services were,
I got, Chair, I got another one.
Okay.
Just for clarification, for example, next door neighbor, music loud music all about until, 2 a.m. in the morning. The children are sleeping next door, they can't sleep. So even the public police nowadays, the police hardly do not come on time. So this is a problem, because I had about 3 families they are suffering. So because I know the social media image was available actively, but nowadays, the city council, all this, very are. So in this situation, what is your message to these people, those actually suffering from this bad noise from the neighbors?
Well, I think this is one mark around noise nuisance and neighbours. I think, Councillor, we can probably take this offline. So, if it's about individual issues, so if you've got issues, for example, about premises that you believe selling counterfeit items, then we would be interested in that. And you can always come through to us if you wish to be able to supply that information. But in terms of noise nuisance, if it's about a specific issue, then really what we need to do is probably take this offline and discuss it a little bit further in terms of.
Yes.
So, Mark, I'll talk to you.
Yeah, I'll thank you.
Yes, Chair, thanks. Chair, I've always wondered how the officers manage to point out the fake ones differently from the proper ones. Can you give us a little snapshot?
Yeah, normally the issue around the fake goods is they the goods can look the same, but it's normally the packaging that gives it away. So both the labels and things like that. But what we tend to do is, if we've got a suspicion that something is fake, we can go make a test purchase first of all, and we can also contact the brand reps. So each of the brands will have a representative who will know from the way that the product is put together is whether or not it's fake or not. So we have our suspicions both based on the price, on the packaging that comes with it, which they generally they ignore. So they'll produce the goods, then put it in a plain box, for example, because actually the box created with the name on can cost as much as creating the product itself. So
sometimes they normally look the same.
Yeah, but the brand reps will be able to look at it and say whether or not it is counterfeit.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moran.
Just coming back on the point about noise pollution, I think this is probably a question for you, Mark. The photo in the slide, there were like 6 officers in high vis. Are they police officers or are they environmental officers that go out to deal with noise pollution?
So that photo was plus. It was one EHO, one locksmith.
Right.
I suspect there was other people behind the camera when the photo was taken.
Because I'm going with this 6 police officers for a stereo. So I was just curious, how often does that actually happen? What's the sort of success rate? Because I can't imagine police want to utilise their time to turn the music down.
This wouldn't have been about turning it down, this is about, I think it's a property and season. Occasionally we don't have any influence because we know the property's vacant. Usually we only have to, police do their own checks before they they give us the resource that's required.
Cool.
So it is a risk-based thing from place. But yeah, that's the most I've ever seen.
6.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you, Chair. My question's about the illegal money lending team. We're certainly seeing in Quinton a rise in loan sharks, and as the cost of living crisis gets worse, that will be replicated in other wards across the city. What resources, if any, have you got to share with councillors so we can let people in our various wards know about this team? Is the material that we can either download or print?
Yeah,
It's certainly a matter that's been raised at a surgery I have, and we all know the misery that these people cause, because they target people on the school gates, they target people's at homes, and it can lead to an increasing spiral of violence, desperation, and also real financial hardship. And this is an important message that perhaps needs to go out across the city, because it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, thank you to the chair. Thanks, Councillor. I agree entirely. There is resource available. We put posters and cards and all sorts of things. There's a website as well, Stop Loan Sharks. If you look up Stop Loan Sharks, you'll see we've got a website, an independent website. It also allows and gives you resources that you can utilise to get the message out. And we've also got the education packs, and we're talking with various government departments at the moment around that. But I'll talk to you offline and give you the name of an officer who will gladly either come and talk or provide you whatever materials you need.
Thank you, that'd be useful, because as we know, people who are in this situation find it very difficult to come forward.
Yeah.
And let's make it as easy as possible for these people, if appropriate, and we have the evidence to prosecute these people as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues, for those questions, and I hope that's given you a perspective on the wide range of activities that obviously the departments we oversee are involved in. So thank you for that. Okay, moving on.
Item 7 is to draw your attention to code of practice for members and officers, particularly that as we have a separate code of practice to the council code. Obviously, both codes apply, but since I think 2016, we know specifically a licensing code, given the special function we exercise here. So I'm inviting you, obviously, to read that code at your leisure. So thank you very much for that. And then 8
Dates of meetings of the Licensing and Public Protection Committee. Practice we've
involved is to hold an in-person meeting like this every couple of months. But between those, we hold informal briefing sessions online, as we found that also assists participation. So obviously these arrangements could be changed, but that's the current pattern. So are you happy to endorse the dates of meetings of Licensing and Public Protection Committee listed?
Yeah.
Agree? Thank you very much. Thank you. I think the next item again is descriptive housekeeping and describes the licence subcommittee arrangements, the membership. That's right, the members are on there. We currently, as you know, nominate the fixed membership of these subcommittees through full council, and we can't change that membership. I am raising though the point with the lawyers and the constitutional side as to whether we could have more flexibility and whether the committee here could determine the membership ultimately of the 3 panels, because that would give us more flexibility in terms of, I think, substitutions and changes to meet the members' workloads and commitments. So I'm raising that point. I don't know what the answer will be yet, but I want to take that back with the 2 other chairs to explore, and obviously we'll come back to the committee to indicate what's possible there.
Okay, and then minutes of the meeting on March 2022. Can we accept the minutes as a true record? Agreed. Thank you very much. And now we're on to the financial outturn report, and David Jones, Finance Manager, is here to introduce that. David.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So I'll try and be brief. I won't go through the whole report, just to look at the important items. The report is the financial outturn for 2021-22, so the year ended in March. The previous report that came to this committee was quarter 3, so I'll just update you on the budget. The budget was increased in the final quarter. There's an additional 47,000 for the apprentice levy. This is costs you've already incurred. Also, there's an additional 239,000 for the April 21 pay award. Again, it's costs you've already incurred. It was a pay award of 1.75%. So this has all increased the budget and therefore reduced the pressures at the year end. The budget was 7.4 million at the end of March. That's set out in the table on page 3. Just to look at the actuals on page 4, so the total net underspend for the year was 483,000. That isn't the whole story. There was within that there was additional expenditure of 510,000. That was related to the response work that you were doing, that your managers and your services are involved in. So environmental health has a large surplus. You can see there in the table just under 800,000. That's slightly misleading because their main focus was on COVID response work, the environmental health, the clear in the title, and much of that was externally funded, so for COVID and for the large public project as well. So to bring in money in as a one-off, we're not going to say no, but please don't infer any future trends from that income. The register office were under a lot of pressure during the year due to COVID again, due to the pandemic, due to the public lockdown. They also had difficulty filling vacancies, which reduces the financial pressure and also affects performance. But they were benefiting in the end from that pent-up demand once local society came away from lockdown and restrictions. So waiting to have been on hold for like 18 months, and many of the other venues were quite slow to open up, so they benefited from that short-term spike. Coroners had the biggest pressure. That's through the workload, through the extra staff they needed. Also, during the year, they opened up an extra court building, so that's capital expenditure. But once it's open, there are repairs, running costs, IT costs that building required. The pressure from COVID is also on a slightly different arc for coroners. They seem to be affected later and longer by the pandemic, plus regulations changed during the time. Medical rules changed on who records COVID as a cause, and all that added to the workload of that service and obviously the costs that they incurred. Just finally, I'll go through the appendices. There has been for the last few committees now a separate appendix for the COVID-related items. That just gives you a bit more detail on what that 510,000 that I mentioned earlier was being spent on, which service areas and what they were doing. Appendix 3 is licensing, and this appendix focuses more on the actual on the budget, just to demonstrate that there's a ring fence in place there being applied. So there's a big pressure, especially on factory licensing, and you can see it also affects Appendix 5, which is the reserves. So the deficit is now over £1 million for that area. Now, obviously, it's a business sector that's is heavily affected by COVID, but there must now be a major focus on fees and rebuilding that market as we move away from COVID during this financial year. So just a brief summary then, that the budget has improved. The majority of your financial pressures during the year were because of COVID, and there's a concern and a focus going forward that we need to be rebuilding that licensing market and the fees income that attaches to it. So those are the main points. Please feel free to ask any questions. I'll do my best to answer them now.
Okay, colleagues, as you'll note, and certainly members of the board committee will know, a number of
areas are self-sustaining in terms of license, in terms of charges we make. Other areas, I think, like the coroners, a separate financial structure, aren't they? And call on our general income of the council. And the point is well made, I think, about taxi licensing. We would expect that to wash its face historically, in that we set the licence fees at a level to pay for the service. We can't make money out of it, we're not allowed to do that by law. But the problem we have, obviously, is it's been very badly affected by COVID, and the income stream has been cut off. And of course, just as we get out of COVID, inflation comes along with a bang. So there we are, that's life, isn't it, really? Any questions or observations to David about the financial report? How often do we get the outturn report, Dave? Remind me, for the committee?
Okay, Chair, so we normally come with a quarterly report, so but I'll have to update on what's happening with the quarterly reports this financial year. So the plan is for quarterly reports. So we may not, I think the timing of the committees, it might not be right in September, but certainly in a few committees' time, we'll have the quarterly reports coming through.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions to David? Observations? No? Okay, well, thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you.
Chair, thank you.
Sorry?
Oh, yes, can we agree the recommendations? Yeah, can we agree to accept the report? Thank you. Agreed. Thank you, that's accepted. Okay, we're on to item 12, the licensing procedures and delegation. And this is Emma Roman, last manager for Emma.
Yeah. So I won't put it up on the screen because nobody will be able to read it anyway. But so this report outlines all of the policies, procedures, and delegations that have been built up over the years. So this report is just to demonstrate to members what the current situation is. Throughout the year, there will be revisions and updates to existing policies. New policies will be introduced, and obviously those will be brought back to members. So, as you've already heard today, the Licensing and Public Protection Committee is responsible for many different aspects of licensing and registration. Things that the licensing service deal with are not all dealt with by the Licensing and Public Protection Committee. So scrap metal, hackney carriage, fare setting and safety sports grounds are executive functions of the council, but the officers will still deal with those functions. So the service is responsible for administering grants, renewals and transfers of various licences, in the main hackney carriage and private hire vehicle licensing, and the Licensing Act 2003 are the main bodies of work. So I say today, I'm just presenting to you the appendices really of the existing policies. So Appendix 1 details all the policies that we have for hackney carriage and private hire licensing. You'll see in Appendix 1, not everything is a policy. We have included things that are legislative requirements and some things that are just application prerequisites, just for completeness, so that everything is represented there. And later on in the year, we will be bringing a separate, distinct hackney carriage and private hire licensing policy document for members to agree, which will include various changes that are required as part of the Department for Transport statutory guidance. You've all been to the member training, so you've all heard me talk about those things in some detail. Appendix 2, is general licensing policy stuff. So stuff that's not covered by the statement of licensing policy or gambling principles or SEV policies. So that's how we deal with massage and special treatments licenses, skin piercers, that kind of thing, and also the animal welfare delegations are in that Appendix 2. Appendix 4 is the statement of licensing policy. That's just an extract from the policy that shows how the delegations are set down in that statement of licensing policy. That is one of the policies that will be brought back to members this year for review. Appendix 5, the statement of gambling principles. Again, that's very recently been done, so that probably won't come back for a while, hopefully. These SEV policies are Appendix 6, which is also due for review after the statement of licensing policy. And then Annex 1 just includes for members good practice and procedures for the subcommittees and then just to talk about the principles of natural justice and that kind of thing. So no new policies for anybody to consider today or to agree. This is a statement of what the existing policies are. And obviously, as I say, different policies will come for review before the committee at various times throughout the year. Okay.
Any questions? Yes.
I've got a question, I'm not sure it's right, but it's about the website, the licensing register website, which is still based on old wards, and it's very difficult to find any licensing application on it, and is it likely to be updated?
Yeah, so the public register, the statutory requirement for public register is anybody's able to come to call the office and make an appointment to come and see a licence application. We do have the electronic register, which is fed from the current licensing software system, which is SOPRA, which we have been trying to replace for about 10 years. So we're really close now to replacing it, but we can't make any changes to the software that we have, the sort of outgoing software. So what we have to do is we haven't been able to update the ward boundaries. We thought we were going to replace the system about 4 years ago, which was when it kind of stopped being supported, and we haven't been able to update those ward boundary changes on there. It does still work to an extent, in that if you put in the postcode or the road name, it should be there. What we do in the interim is all elected members do get a copy of the summary of licence applications, and you can have a look on there. If you can't get it from the public register, then if you email the licensing generic email address, an officer will send it to you. I can only apologise. We are trying absolutely like 26 hours in a day to get it fixed and to get it replaced. It's like the thing that takes up all my day. But we are getting there, and it will be replaced. But yeah, it's not great, and it looks hideous. But it's still better than many other local authorities ones. But yeah, so I can only apologise for that.
Okay.
So do you have a timescale then for that to happen?
Yeah, we did have a timescale. Unfortunately, there aren't many things that have been impacted by COVID, in that we haven't been able to dedicate the resource to getting the product testing set up to get the data migration done and everything. It's a huge piece of work. We've got thousands of licenses, and we have to transfer all the history from all of those licenses as well. So it was supposed to go live this month. It won't be going live this month, unfortunately, because it's not in a fit state to go live, and we don't want to go live with them if it doesn't work. So the anticipated go live is going to be October.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, obviously, keep us informed on that.
Yes.
I have had some representations from certainly new members about the website, reflecting Councillor Knowles' points. And also making the point to me that it would be better if it were a bit more like a planning portal, the access arrangements of planning have. So whether there is scope to look at that as well.
So the new system will have an online public register, okay, and it will be better than the one that we have now, obviously. It will include the opportunity to be able to comment directly from the website to make representations. That's my understanding, but obviously we don't have.
All right.
But it will be reflected.
Okay, well obviously that will come back to the committee, and members' experience will guide, how happy we are with that. But obviously you've been very straight with the and you've said it needs a lot of work.
When it's ready to launch, what we'll do is we'll bring it back to members to show you how it works in terms of your constituents and in terms of members themselves being able to access that information, how it's going to look. So we'll bring that back.
Okay, work in progress. Yes. Yeah. Okay. As Emma said, this is a summary of the existing delegations. Delegations can be reviewed, of course, and members will be aware that we went from a situation pre-COVID where we sat as members and determined taxi applications to a situation where we delegated that to officers. Now, there's room to review that, but of course it doesn't mean going back. It would mean going back to a system where there'd be a lot more hearings, and it would be arguably less convenient for customers, and so on. But those issues can be considered if member funds. But we probably set a small group to look at those issues, without commission members. So I'm just putting that out there for future consideration. Let me know what your feelings are as members about those issues. And you have a document there about the questions. Anything else? Okay, if not, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. We know the report.
Agreed? Thank you. Okay, we're on to regulatory enforcement activity report. I think that's right. Quarter 4. Who's reading that?
I will, Chair.
Yeah.
I don't suppose to go through the whole of the activity report, but I know the Chair wanted to bring your attention to vaping.
Yeah, this is your information report basically. So any issues you want to raise in detail, you can either go back up about particular cases or make a point here. I was going to ask though, given there's been some media coverage about underage vaping and the prevalence of it, I wonder what we were doing around shop sales and so on in terms of enforcement.
So vaping is part of the underage sales that we do, Chair, as a matter of course. So there are regulations around vaping stores, vaping shops, both in terms of the way that the chemicals should be described, the lists and ingredient lists that should be with them, and as well as the content. So as a result of that, we do visit vaping shops to check to make sure they're complying with regulations. We do utilise children to go in and attempt to buy vaping products because it's the same principle as cigarettes. We're also, at the moment, we've agreed with Public Health that we will do a project on vaping shops where we will also test the contents of the vapes to what the ingredients are and to ensure that the nicotine levels, etc., are as they should be. We have a slight problem, and I'll draw the committee's attention to this, in that we're trying to bring extra resources on a temporary basis to do this. And like everything else that we're finding, there appears to be a shortage of professional officers that would be able to undertake this type of work as there is across the profession. So we are hopeful that we'll be able to get it up and running as quickly as possible. But hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll bring a report back to this committee with findings across the city.
Okay. Any other points you want to draw attention to, colleagues, on the report? These will be coming to you on standard items for information into committee. So you've got the activity range and individual case for it as well. And you can always follow that up behind the scenes resolution. Okay, can we accept the report? Thank you very much.
Again, on 14, prosecutions and cautions report, this is the baseline information provided to us all here to show us the extent of the activity. You get regular reports on this. Again, are there any individual cases you want to draw attention to, or any other matters you want to raise? No, again, you can pick these up with officers behind the scenes, I suppose. Okay, so can we accept report 14? Is that agreed? Agreed, thank you. Okay, we're on to Chair's authority, and that is the indication of the matters which you've delegated to me. For example, I am asked if I approve the removal, the suspension or removal of licences of taxi drivers in extreme circumstances, criminal allegations, the rest of that. That's one example of that. But other things may be brought to me under the delegation powers. So can we note that report, please? Agreed. Thank you very much. No urgent business has been notified to me. And so I'll move on to 17 and move authority.
The Chair officers in an urgent situation between the chair, jointly with the relevant chief officer, has authority to act on behalf of the committee. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, well, that is our agenda for today, so thank you, Councillor Moran.
One other point, before the election, former councillor Mike Sharp, who stepped down now, raised the issue of beggars at traffic lights. You might remember this, and it was something initially raised cross-party on this committee about the concern of exploitation and possible modern slavery. And I believe it was discussed that we were going to talk to the cabinet member and the West Midlands Police about it. And as a committee, try and explore that and do some work to see what we can do to prevent that. And I was just wondering, obviously, because Mike Sharp's not on the council anymore, what progress had been made on that, and if you could update the committee.
Well, I've certainly been in discussion with Councillor Cotton. Post the elections, I wrote to him yesterday on the matter, and I've asked him to give me an updated picture of the policy, because there have been a number of discussions, as you know, which relate to what we call public spaces protection. That's right. And the issue has been bound up with this wider consideration of these orders. So I've asked him to give me the up-to-date policy. I was slightly concerned, again, I won't confirm this, I don't know whether it's the case, that action on begging had been excluded from most of these policies. Yeah. And personally, I want to know why that's the case, because my job is to reflect your concerns as a committee. And I think very valid points were made, because my concern is, driving into the city centre, as Councillor Sharp was saying, we see people, in positions of danger to themselves, trying to beg from vehicles and so on. I even saw one guy in a tunnel, in one of the city tunnels. So I am concerned personally, and I want to reflect the committee's concern about this. So I will bring back information about this when I've got the information from Councillor Cotton. Because as far as I'm concerned, it remains a live matter, and certainly I know the committee was concerned. So thank you very much, Councillor Moran. Okay, right, that is the close of the formal business. Thank you very much, colleagues, and I'll see you next time. Go online. Thank you.